Hey everyone, welcome back to another interview on the Agape Investing channel. Today I'm talking with my new friend, Jordan Alvarez, who is the founder of The Marked Co., where she helps new business owners to start and grow their businesses, specifically by finding and honing in on their perfect customer. She also helps business owners to view their marketplace as their mission field, which is something I'm super passionate about, and that's why I'm so excited to bring you this interview today. And with that, we'll get on to it. Okay. Hey, Jordan, how's it going?
Hey, good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm super excited to have you here today. I wanted to first quick let everyone know that I connected with Jordan on Instagram. I found her profile, I think just looking up the hashtag faith and work, and found one of your posts, and I was just blown away by the content that you have there and was just so excited because the stuff that you're talking about, I'm super passionate about. And so thank you for sharing this kind of stuff with other Christians. And yeah, just a shout out for that. Like if people see someone on Instagram that they just admire what they're doing, you never know what'll happen if you just reach out and say, hey, and
Right.
introduce yourself. So
Yeah.
now we're friends, and this is so
Yeah.
cool that you're here today.
Thank you. Thank you. And I love and I'm so appreciative that you say that because that really is like my creative outlet. I love, love, love producing the content for the Mark Company. So thank you for saying that and that compliment.
Yeah. So I wanted to start out. We had talked on the phone a couple days ago, and you had shared your kind of entrepreneurial journey with me. And I wanted you to share that with other people because I think that it's really special in just how you've kind of hopped from doing different things. So will you start off by sharing that with us?
Yeah, it's so funny that you say hop from doing different things because if I were to define it, that is 100% the way I would define it. But
Yes.
I really didn't even recognize it at the time, but um, I, I grew up in a culture of this that just really cultivated this mindset of entrepreneurial pursuits and, um, really making money off of your craft and your art and the things you do well. People want the things you do well. And I saw it, the earliest memories I have of it is in my mom and my grandparents. So it was nothing for us to spend the weekend traveling around the South at vendor shows. And my grandparents made little wood carvings and they created these things and would set up at these vendor shows. But both had full time careers, had jobs that they worked and were coming closer to retirement in. And so never a it was never an odd thing to see my family working what we now know and label as a side gig. Like now we toss that word around all the time, but that's really the culture I was raised in. And with my mom as well. I mean, my mom is so talented. She stayed at home for my sister and I while we were growing up. But if you needed her to renovate a house, to be every vendor at your wedding, she had it covered. Like she can do so many things. And so from a really early age, I saw this, people would have a need and they couldn't do it. I really honestly thought that people just didn't want to do it. And maybe my mom wanted to do it. I didn't have any concept of, no, your grandparents and your mom are gifted in particular areas that other people are
Mhm.
not gifted in. And so this was just cultivated over and over and over throughout my childhood. And I was a weird kid. I saw a friend, I can remember probably second or third grade, I saw a friend who had opened a lemonade stand, like pretty common thing for kids to open a lemonade.
Yeah.
And I would not have articulated it like this at that point, but I had the understanding to say, well, they've got the market on lemonade stands. I'm going to provide entertainment. So I drugged my sister into this, and we created a play and invited all of our neighbors to this play in my grandparents' front yard. And then I didn't think anything about it. But looking back now, I'm like, no, that's a weird second grader. that's that's a quirky kid that would even think to do that, or not just copy the lemonade stand, just do the lemonade stand too. And so I really have a lot of times I can look back throughout my childhood and see like, oh, these things were really being cultivated in my life. And then I get to high school and, you know, now I realize that adults don't ask 13-year-olds to run fundraisers and organize events and things like that. But I was getting asked to do that type of stuff for our church and our community. And while I was
Wow.
in a small town, 3,000 to 5,000 people, I just realized now, like, I'm probably not going to ask a 13-year-old to organize a fundraiser
Yeah.
or, or do something on that big of a scale. And so I think people recognized it in me, but really didn't even have the language to articulate to me, like, hey, this is something you might need to think about pursuing. And so at 16, I experienced a call into ministry. I believe God was calling and leading my heart to do something in ministry. I didn't know what. The only thing I saw women doing in ministry was like some element of music or children. So
Yep.
I was like, I guess that's what I'm going to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just where I'll go. And so that led me to college at Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth. It's about an hour from where we live now. And, you know, I was in college and people were asking me to do things that were not related to ministry. Like they wanted me to make them canvases for, at that time I did like some mixed media art. And so I was making canvases in my dorm room. Like there's so many things that I can look back now, like none of my other friends were making canvases in their dorm room. They were like reading for their class. So I just kind of took that. I graduated from college. I had this humanities degree, which is basically like a theological perspective on philosophy and philosophical thought. And I had no idea what to do with it. So we landed in Tyler, which is a little town here in Texas. And I was working at an accounting firm. And I'm decent at like admin stuff. I'm organized and and I'm working at this admin firm, and I can remember standing in the break room one afternoon with two other women. And at the time I had been making invitations for some friends from college. They had recently had babies. And so I was making their baby announcements and their kids' birthday cards. And I'm standing there and I've mentioned like, hey, yeah, I stayed up till 11:30 last night working on these invitations, and they wanted to see a picture of it. So I showed them a picture of it, and they're standing there, and it's almost like an out of body experience thinking back on it now, because I'm standing there talking to them and they're like, I can't believe what you made these, you painted this, you did the, hand lettering and calligraphy on this. I wish you were around for my wedding, or I need to tell my sister-in-law about what you're doing. And at that moment, I realized I can make money doing something I'm good at. And so that just kind of launched my wedding invitation. So I went into high-end wedding invitation design and did that for about 3 years. I'm working with clients who have bigger stationery budgets than I do a wedding budget. Like my husband and I had a very small wedding budget, and I'm now working with clients who are spending 5 figures on their wedding invitations. And I'm producing all of this stuff, doing all of this one-on-one client work. And I just realized like, man, this is not a great business model. There's a lot on the front end as far as time is concerned. There's a lot on the production side of it. Like I'm paying for a lot of what I'm producing. And it was whenever I had a really big order. At that time, it was the biggest order up until that point. And I'm working on it, and I'm really excited to, show the final product and stuff. And we get the proofs done. And I had some clauses in my guarantee and stuff about, if you get the proof, you check everything. If anything's left off, it's on you. And we get the prints back, and they are like very detailed. They have letterpress, they have hand painting on them. I mean, they're like over the top. We get them back, and we've left the year off. And it's an order of like 300. And you're talking $8 or $9 a piece on each invitation. And I was just devastated. I knew that it was on the customer. Like it was my responsibility to create that proof, but that clause was in there. But I reproduced that whole order just because it was my customer, and I wanted the year on them for their sake, for their memories. And I just realized like, this is not a great business model. not a great business model. So around that same time, I'm telling you, HOP accurately defined
Yes.
my entrepreneurial journey. Around that same time, I am completing a teaching certification, which was essentially a year before just a Hail Mary, like, hey, this is security. This is a reliable job. I'm just going to do this teaching certification because I have my bachelor's. I have literally hopped from thing to thing. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to do this teaching certification. And so that certification was coming up to the point where I was about to have to do what they call field experience and actually go into the classroom. So I am kind of at the end of this wedding invitation. I've kind of realized like, oh, the honeymoon phase is worn off. Like I was just out of a lot of money. And so I took a teaching job, and almost immediately I realized like, this is not for me. I loved my kids. I taught preschool special ed. I loved my kids. I loved the people I taught with, but it just was not for me. It was not for me. And so I immediately started like turning my, like, what in the world can I do? And at the time I became a skincare consultant because I figured if I can get, it was residual. So it was a direct opposite of that wedding invitation company I had. And so I figured if I can justify leaving this teaching job, I'm going to do it. Like 100%, I'm going to leave the teaching job whenever I match my income. So about a year in, I matched my income. I left teaching and continued working from home with our daughter. We had our daughter 2 years ago. Continued working from home doing skincare, and just over time, it has morphed into this realization that like teaching was very intentional in like God's plan and direction for my life, because I do love the art of teaching, but it was just under the umbrella of the public school, just didn't jive with me. And so now I found myself in this company that I founded about a year ago. Corona had something, we were kind of mishapped on the Corona end of things, but now I'm helping small businesses grow and scale, and particularly by finding their perfect customer. And I love it. I love what I'm doing.
Yeah. I don't know. I actually didn't tell you this while we were on the phone the other day, but I started out in elementary education when I was in college. And I did that because someone back in high school had told me, like, you're a really good teacher. You connect with people really well and can explain things in a way that, other people can connect with or something. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to be a teacher. So I basically took that and ran with it and went to college and started in elementary education. And I think it was just like a year and a half or so into that, I realized that I love teaching. I love teaching people, but it just wasn't kids that I like kids, but it wasn't like I loved teaching them. And I was like, I don't want to be in a classroom every day all the time. So I kind of had a similar, I just was realizing that when you were speaking, and I was like, wow, we're actually really similar in that sense. So, but you actually got to the teaching part. I never even got there.
Well, I only got through field experience. So technically.
Oh, well, yeah. See, yeah, there you go.
But so, isn't that neat how like that kind of shapes, like we are gifted in teaching and we just land where we think it fits best. And then he continues to work and mold that into what it actually should look like for our lives.
Yeah. My husband actually, he finished his degree in elementary education, and instead of becoming a teacher in school, he became a teacher in church. So he's a youth pastor. And I know that we connected with that. And your husband is also a youth pastor, which is really cool. So yeah. And I would love to know, so you had gone to seminary, not technically, and you verified this for me, it wasn't technically like seminary as far as most of us are familiar with, but you went there for your undergrad. I want to know how that played into your experience as an entrepreneur. Like, how has that impacted the way that you approach your business?
Yeah, so I attended the college at Southwestern. So at the time, they had just recently, like within the last 1 or 2 years, opened up this college, this undergrad program on the seminary campus. And so we were like the first class to go through this guinea pig project. And that meant that we specifically had teachers of theology, like the seminary professors teaching us, just because they were running double time, this new college venture. And so up until the point of leaving for college, I led a relatively nominal teenage Christian life. I accepted Christ at 9, 10. I went through like youth group culture, and by most accounts, they were separate. Like, people recognized me as a believer, but I didn't have any real concept for the scriptures and what they actually did for our life as a believer. And I really think that that's what seminary opened my eyes to, what the college at Southwestern really opened my eyes to, is that this is a vivid and intentional story to point us to Christ. And then, like, who Christ is in us matters. And I never saw it. I saw it as individual Old Testament stories, and then we flip the page and we see Matthew and Jesus is born. And it wasn't until I stepped onto that campus that it just came alive. And I saw people really like living into this. But there was a lot of tension because I was a regular teenager from a public school coming into this very stoic, like very Christian environment. And I would have said like, oh yeah, I'm from a Christian environment, but I did not know Christian environment until I got to Southwestern. And so it wasn't easy. In the first few years, it was not easy. And what I tend to do is just find the common denominator and then just fit in that cookie cutter. And so that's exactly what I did at Southwestern. I just realized early on that not many people were talking about faith and work. Myself as a female on a seminary campus, predominantly male, and really the roles in ministry that are articulated by the campus are specifically pastoral roles. And I'm a complementarian woman. Like, I don't believe that, my position is in the pulpit. And so it was just a really hard time figuring out, like, where do I fit in ministry if I'm not, like, I started in music because I thought, like, that's where women are, in music. I started in music. I got into theory and was like, nope, not for music. So I transitioned into humanities, and it was just so confusing, but it grew and deepened my love for the scriptures in a way that I never would have believed possible. I didn't even know to have the understanding that it would do that. And so for that, I'm immensely grateful. And I met my husband. He was one of my best friends when we came in 2008. And we were friends for 4 or 5 years. And we got married in the last year of college. And he is the best gift God has given me, second to my salvation. I would have never imagined how much of a treasure it would be to be married to him and have that friendship as a foundation and everything. But, I can remember sitting in classes and in chapel, and just, this is where the rub was in a lot of ways. I can remember sitting in classes thinking, like, man, like, where do I fit? And really just a tremendous guilt for not feeling particularly called to, like, the mission field or full-time work at a church. Like, I just didn't know. Like, and it felt like guilt, like, oh, well, you're just materialistic and don't want to go overseas. Well, you're just, and I would always just kind of chalk it up to that. Like, well, it's because you're fighting this call. But I wasn't experiencing anything. Like, I loved missionaries. I had a ton of friends, and I just wasn't there. And so I remember sitting in a chapel, and I can't remember anything else about the sermon, but clearly I can remember whoever was speaking, I can't even remember who was speaking, but he started talking about the relationship that Andrew Fuller and William Carey had with one another. And that Andrew Fuller said, in terms of a mining analogy, he said, if Carrie said, if I go down, will you hold the rope? And Fuller later on says, like, for our entire life, I held the rope of his ministry. And it clicked for the first time since I had experienced a call into ministry. I felt like that is what I was created to do. That, like, I don't even know what it looks like. It's 3 words, hold the rope. But that's what I was created to do. And just the idea of someone holding the rope for kingdom work, I had never even, I don't know how I believed missionaries got on the mission field, but it had never occurred to me that there were other people either at home or in global industries across the world holding the rope for kingdom work. And so after that chapel service, I didn't say anything to anybody because I just didn't know how to articulate it. I didn't know how to say, like, you know how they said, hold the rope? I'm going to hold the rope. Like, there's
That's my job.
Yeah, like, whatever hold the rope means, that's what I'm going to do. But shortly after that chapel service, I didn't say anything. I didn't, like, go and talk. I didn't tell Cody about it. Nobody knew that I had even, like, that had even clicked with me. But I worked at the recreation center on campus, and there was a man that worked there. He was probably mid-30s at the time, and he came and stood at the desk and was talking to me, and he said, hey, I have a book I want to give you. And he came back the next day, and he had the E-Myth Revisited. Have you ever read the E-Myth?
I have not read it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
So he gave me that book, and he said, I don't know what you're going to do, but one day you're going to own something. And I was like, what? At this time, I had no idea. Like, I didn't even really understand the term entrepreneur. I did not have any clue. He was like, I don't know what you're going to do, but you need to read this book before you do it. And so I read the book. And Katie, I have read every primary source from every philosopher. I have read every contemporary of Christ. And the E-Myth Revisited was the most impactful book. And it was just a guy handing it to the front desk girl at the recreation center. And so I, like, looking back on that now, I know God used that to confirm in me whenever I'm, like, questioning it today, like, what in the world am I doing? He reminds me, like, no, I told other people to confirm this in you. There's still work to be done. Keep going. And so for that, I'm immensely grateful for seminary. While there was some difficulty, like, and some tension, seminary played a tremendous role in my ability to think and communicate, and then also, like, put a Christian worldview on what I believe life should look like.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that. I know that you had told me about that whole hold the rope idea and concept. I would love to ask you this kind of challenging question. So as business people, not even necessarily entrepreneurs, but as business people that are Christians, kind of back here on home base, we'll just call this home base, and not going out and being full-time missionaries, do you feel that our kind of only role is to hold the rope? Or do you feel like there is a, kind of bigger purpose to our work here in our, if we're entrepreneurs or even just, business people, or even, maybe not in a business position, but just some kind of work?
Yeah. So it might not even be a bigger picture, but definitely there are other parts of our role if we are seeing our occupation as a mission field. There are 100, like, one, you just have to do the occupation and do it well. And then 2, like, yeah, you might not be personally supporting and sending your money overseas every month, but how are you right now in your community creating change and creating an environment that points people toward the gospel? And yeah, we use our words to share the gospel, but our lives are a testimony to what God has done for us and what God continues to do in the world. And so our work is 100% a product of that. And while we have, like, work all over the globe, we have work right here at home too.
Yeah, that is definitely hitting the nail on the head. So what do you think that we need to do as just, Christians here in the workplace? how do we need to change our mindset, or what do we need to do to change our mindset to start viewing our workplace, our marketplace, our job as our mission field?
So this is there's so much talk about mindset, and I mean, I am a devourer of like self-help. I love it. I love it. And I love applying a gospel framework to it, a Christian worldview to it. But simply, if we just believed what the scriptures tell us the Spirit does in our life, it happened. Like, if we believed and walked confidently in the fact that the Spirit corrects, He instructs, He enlightens dead hearts, He enables us to bear good fruit and love God and love others, our work would reflect that without effort. Like, a life devoted to Christ means that He permeates every single aspect,
Yes.
including the excellence of your work. And so, like, I really think it's a spirit issue. Like, us just not believing, like, no, we have the full embodiment of Christ, like, living and dwelling in us, motivating our work and inspiring the things we do. So I think kingdom work means living into that right now. And like, when we get our minds right with that and constantly take every single thing into submission to who the Spirit is in our life, like, we're going to see that we are molding the kingdom right now. And yeah, our work should definitely reflect that. And so, if you went into your job every single day viewing it like that, like, you've created a mission field. Like,
Yes.
that is a new environment because of who the Spirit is in you. Like, you walking into a place and then transforming that. Like, that's literally what the missionaries are doing on the mission field right now. So
Yes.
let's do it in our places of business.
Oh, I love that. I think that I went to a Christian college as well, and it definitely helped me to kind of mold this mindset into seeing everywhere as a mission field. And it was interesting. I think one of the most impactful times that I had there was that I was actually an intern in our missions department. And so I helped send out mission teams. I also went on a few mission trips myself. But going through those trainings of like, how do we be missionaries like in these other countries? How do we share our faith with other people? How do we share our testimonies? Things like that. It was preparing us for when we went overseas. However, it was so helpful to have that, set of tools in my toolbox in order to use right here in our own backyards. And so I think it would be awesome if we were to, first off, teach people more about how, their workplace is their mission field. And then second off, prepare all of us to just be missionaries right here, like with your neighbors, with your coworkers, and, even with your family. I mean, honestly. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting thinking about that, because we were, being prepared to go out into the mission field where like now I'm using those same, lessons right here at home. And so, yeah, I think that's really cool.
It's funny you say that, because I recently posted my perfect customer framework or formula, and it's like 4 steps. You know who the steps are from? Jesus.
Yes.
Like, he learned who he was coming and speaking to. He invested in their community. He created content around what they needed, and then he delivered the gift of salvation. Like, that's literally the perfect customer framework. Like, we go into the community where our people are, and we're living as examples of what he's already given us, like by coming from heaven to earth, investing in, like, there's a specific reason he came at the time and to the place he did, and so, like, people are like, oh, the perfect customer formula, da, da, da. And I'm like, yeah, it's been around for 2,000 years.
It's so interesting. There's so much that we can learn from the Bible, like so many practical business principles that, like, Jesus basically was an entrepreneur. He took a risk, and he's kind of like, in a sense, selling salvation, not selling, but telling people all about it and saying like, here's this offer I have for you. It's
Yeah.
kind of like a lead magnet in a sense.
Yep.
It's like,
He's
here's
definitely
this,
persuading
it's
Paul.
free.
Yeah.
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 So it's so fascinating, and that was the stuff that I was learning at college, was like, oh, like the Bible, there's so many things that relate to
Yeah.
business that it's like mind blowing. And yeah, I love that. And I love that you are modeling your own business now, and your principles that you're teaching people solely off of what Jesus is teaching you by his own actions and words. And it's like, well, why don't we just do what Jesus did, but
Yeah.
implement
Like,
that into our business? Wow.
exactly.
Oh, I love that. So, um, I want to talk a little bit more about like practical steps. So I know, like, we talked a little bit more, we talked a little bit about mindset, but practically, maybe give people some idea of like what it looks like to kind of be a missionary in the workplace. Does that mean we have to have like a faith-based name for our business, or do we have to put Bible verses on our products, or I guess, what does that look like for people who are trying to do this now?
Yeah. I think, and I even experienced this same like butting of heads when I first started talking to my husband about the Marked company, and we didn't have like a name for it at that point, but I was telling him kind of like what I envisioned and what I believed it could do. He even was like, "Are you sure you want to do this like in the Christian like
Mm,
vein?" He was like, "Just be like a super awesome person who helps business owners." And I came back and I thought about it and I prayed and like, no, I really think I need to be specifically Christian. But what I am coaching is not specifically Christian. Like,
yeah.
you don't have to have like Waves of Faith as your car wash name. Like that, it doesn't have to be something like overtly Christian. Like who you are is overtly Christian. You
Hmm.
don't have to put, crosses on all of your things, but if you do, that's great. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Like if there are little hints of your beliefs seasoned throughout your branding, that's great, but it doesn't have to be like that way. Our excellence and the fact that we view our work as a living testimony of who God has made us and recreated us into is your witness. Like our pastor is
Yeah.
preaching right now through James, and he said something we're toward the end of it. It's taken us a little
Hmm.
while to get through it. We're toward the end of it, and he mentioned the word witness. He said when he read this, he was immediately like, "Wait a minute, what?" But he said, "Find somewhere that is in the text that indicates going to witness, like you
Mm,
in the action of going. Find somewhere where that is like implicated when witness is used." And he said, by and large, throughout the scripture, witness is something we are. Like it is seen in the scriptures as who we literally are. And so this is to quote him. He said, it's something that we are. We are living testimonies of the character of God on earth. And that should like transform the way you think about your work, transform it. And, you know, thinking about how many people, I think it's something like 30 or 45% of people are disgruntled with the jobs that they hold. Like they are, and I hate to use the word
yeah.
satisfied because our satisfaction is ultimately in Christ, but like
Mm,
we should find enjoyment in our work. And it breaks my heart that 30 to 45% of Americans are dissatisfied in their jobs because work was given to us in the perfect scenario of the garden. Like prior to the fall, work was something that was given to us as good and
mm,
God glorifying, and something that God said, "Hey, I'm giving you these, you have hands that can till the ground. The animals do not have those hands. Like there are specific things about you that make your work special." And that was before the fall. Like now, okay, it hurts, it's toil, it feels burdensome, but like the fact that we should find enjoyment in our work does not change. And
Mhm.
I think when we do that, everything else is influenced. Everything else is then going to excel. The way we speak to our customers or the people walking into our brick and mortar changes. And like it makes a complete difference when we see work as God glorifying instead of burdensome. This is something I have to do. I'm just waiting for Friday. I'm
Mhm.
waiting for the one vacation week I get a year. Like, man, that stinks. Like, God did not intend for you to spend 40 hours a week, like, blah, 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 like always mad about your job.
Have you read the book Garden City?
No,
That's another one. I know that we've like thrown
I know.
back and forth a ton of books, even like on our phone call. But that's another one. I'll send you the link to it. But
I'm gonna write it down.
it's this kind of it's by John Mark Comer, and it's this idea that we had the garden where
Mhm.
Adam and Eve were, and it was perfect, and God gave them work, and then the fall came, but we're kind of heading towards this garden city again, like this
Mhm.
perfect, the world, when after everything, after heaven and Jesus comes, yada yada, that whole thing. But the
Mhm.
whole idea is this garden city and how it's this perfect place where we have work, and kind of how work looks like when it's in the image of God. And yeah, he talks a lot about exactly what you're saying, and I'm like, ooh, she's gonna love this book.
No, I will. I'm
So
gonna get it.
yes.
And like us as believers, we are constantly being sanctified to the picture of the image of God, like what we were intended to be. And so everything about the way we live right now should also be in that process of sanctification. The way we lead our families, the way we lead our employees, the way we speak to the girl at the grocery store, like our mindset should be so focused on the kingdom that it's already starting to kind of look like the kingdom, with the fact that we're still in sin, the fact that
Yes.
we're still in a broken world, just being like a backstage actor,
Mhm.
not like our lives should look like we are moving toward the kingdom. And too often, like they just kind of look stalled.
Yeah. Oh, there's like, I'm getting like goosebumps hearing you talk about some of this. There's just so much good stuff, and
I
I
get
like
so
want to
fired
keep
up.
going.
I
But
just,
but yeah, I mean, you're so right. Like in the Lord's Prayer, when we're asking like your kingdom come, God, and it's like that starts with us. Like that
yeah,
is something that we can do daily, is bring the kingdom here through our actions and our service and the way that we love people and treat people.
exactly.
And kind of as you were saying, how we need to continue to, like, as we go through life, show the gospel. I mean, that's also seen in the Great Commission in Matthew 28, where he's saying go and make disciples, and he's not necessarily saying like go overseas, go all these places. It's more of like a, as you go, like as you continue your daily life, as you do the things that you're normally doing, go and make disciples, tell them about this good news. And simply, a lot of what you were saying is that we can start those conversations even just by being set apart from people, and being the light of Christ, and being excellent at what we do. Because if we're made in God's image, where he is just this perfect person, and he's perfect in everything that he does, we should strive for that. We should strive for perfection. We have to have the understanding and the grace to know that we're not going to necessarily reach there, but we can try every day to be perfect in our businesses and the way that we treat people. And so, I mean, that's exactly what you're saying, is like, bring the kingdom here. We can do that.
Hmm.
So I want to go off of your kind of like your niche, in a sense, that you focus on, honing in on your perfect customer. And I want to know how that, so we kind of briefly touched on that. How does that align with our faith to just, find your perfect customer and focus in on them?
Yeah, so I think that God has given us individual gifts. I think that certain people are wired certain ways, and more often than not, we find ourselves just kind of stagnant in whatever came after college, like kind of like teaching. It
Yes.
would have been this easy to end up teaching for the next 40 years,
Mm.
but that's not how God wired me. And so I think it determines, finding your perfect customer determines whether your business dies or ultimately thrives. And if you believe like your giftings are this thing, your passion, the thing that is going to draw people in and give you an influence over their lives for the glory of the gospel and who God created you to be, you got to have a business that survives. Like, you don't have that platform, you don't have that ability if you don't have a business that survives. So I think that the hinge in this is finding and speaking to your perfect customer. So I am totally distraught, like watching business owners, and specifically like new business owners, either they're in the first like 6 months, just kind of like before they've even like maybe set up a website or a Facebook page or anything. They're frustrated because people are coming to them and wanting discounts, or they're wanting them to do stuff for free, or they're a friend or family member who's like, hey, you can throw this event, you're so good at it. And you're in the back of your mind thinking like, yeah, I was about to set up like packages, I don't have time to, or whatever. And I think it's less an issue. Human nature is to find issue with the customer, the person asking for that. But I think it's less an issue of that and more an issue of the messaging that we're delivering. And so it is critical that you get your messaging right. And so I'm not saying that we don't talk to every single customer like with love and with understanding and with compassion. Like, do that. 100% do that. But your messaging and the way you structure your business based on what aligns with your beliefs and aligns with what you offer and aligns with who you ultimately want to serve is going to draw and attract those customers that end up you look back and you're like, oh wow, this is the perfect customer. Like, she literally fits the profile I created. And so when we're not doing that, when we don't align all of those things to funnel into serving our perfect customer and delivering messaging that she hears and receives well, our business will die. And that sounds dramatic. It really does sound dramatic. But what happens is we end up continuing to take these customers that frustrate us, that wear us out, that are always asking for things that we don't provide, that are, showing us Pinterest pictures and wanting us to copy them, like whatever it is, if you're a maker or a service provider. And no one is going to be able to stand up against that over the period of 5 years, over the period of 6 years, 7 years. And so what I see as a desperate need for new business owners is honing who their perfect customer is. And so I don't want you to get burnt out. I don't want you to get frustrated. I don't want you to lack joy in doing what God created you to do. So let's figure out how to talk to the people that we want coming in our doors and really attract them better. And so if we stay in the game, if we get to continue to play this business thing, we nurture, we take care of our people and our business, and we continue to be innovative and creative, we have the opportunity to use our place in the marketplace for the mission of Christ. So like, all of it it's really two parts. First, we got to get you a business that works, that makes you some money and gives you a platform. And then like, there's a big global picture to this too, because then you get to ultimately have an impact all over the world for the glory of God. But that doesn't demote the fact that you're still having an impact for the glory of God now. So let's do it to the best of our ability. Let's figure out how to serve the people we want to serve well.
Wow. Okay. One last book that I need to tell you about, and I may have mentioned it on the phone the other day, but Jordan Rayner's book, Master of One, is kind of the same idea. And I think, again, it really does go back to the Bible. Like, all of this always just goes right back to the Bible. And that if we're following our calling from God, our calling isn't necessarily like all these little things where you're going to like get driven into these, different paths. Usually our calling is kind of like a narrow path of like, okay, these are my skills and abilities. This is what God has gifted me with. And if I follow these gifts and abilities that he's given me, and if I hone in on those, I'm able to serve specific people very well. And a lot of times it plays off of our own experiences. And so for you, especially now with the Marked Co., you know, you have these entrepreneurial endeavors where you've learned all these different skills and ideas, and then you have this gifting of teaching, and God has now paired your life experiences with this gift he's given you, and he's like, I want you to serve these people, and I want you to teach them and tell them how to do this and how to do this well. And I think that's ultimately, yeah, what you said, glorifying God.
It's funny that you say that, because one of my favorite aspects of teaching and like building lesson plans was something that as special ed teachers we were required to do, but now gen ed teachers are having to take it on too, is differentiation. And so we as special ed teachers had like, you know, we had courses and we received training in differentiation. And I love the idea of providing different ways to teach someone the same concept, but like you need to hear it in a different way than Susie sitting beside you. And I had no idea that God would use that, and was already kind of fueling that idea, like, okay, there's different ways to speak, and there's a messaging and there's a delivery behind this. And so when you figure out how to do that where people receive it and they learn, like that's the gift of the teacher, is they learn. And the same thing with perfect customer. Like you're 100% right. Like God has, like, it looked like hopping, but it was really, it was very intentional.
It's like puzzle pieces coming together, and then you get the whole picture, and you're like, oh, like, even though I obviously wasn't meant to be like a school teacher, I'm learning bits and pieces from this that I can now go and implement into this new business that you have. And yeah, I mean, obviously God has a plan for all of this, and we just need to trust it. But sometimes in the process, you're like, why did I just take this weird little detour and then loop back around? And now it's like, oh, it all comes together.
To get to school, it's like, why, Lord? Why? But it was such a gift to have the Spirit directing my life in a way that says, like, you're going to be used for kingdom work, whether you stayed in the classroom or whether you're here running the smart company stuff now. Like, I'm not going to forget you. I have an intended purpose for your life. Like, what a gift. What a gift.
Yes. And so let's talk about kind of your next steps that you're kind of going into, this next path that God is kind of taking you down. I know that you are launching a course very shortly here. Can you tell us all a little bit more about that, and maybe where we can connect with you if anyone's interested in it?
Yeah, so I'll be launching the Perfect Customer Blueprint on July 8th. The cart will only be open for 8 to 10 days. So I think I'm going to close cart on July 16th. So that's within like the next 2 weeks. But until then, I'm going to be delivering content around that idea of the perfect customer, and just different aspects that concern your branding, that concern content creation. But this blueprint, essentially, I'm giving you all of the things I've learned in the last 7 years. I've ran a service-based business in the wedding industry, and I've ran a product-based business in the skincare industry. And so what I found is that the rules don't change. Like, the way and the formula is the same across the board. And so what I've done is I've taken this idea of finding your perfect customer, which is great. And many of the business owners that may watch this may already have done that. But there's so much that it builds on in terms of your branding and your content delivery and the way you type up your copy and the images that you post and your colors. And so I'm going to give you all of that. Like, it's just going to be in one place. You're going to have access to it for the rest of your life, or as long as computers exist. And and I'm so excited about it. I've been working on it for a few months now, and I'm just really, really, really excited to see what it does for those business owners who have just kind of felt like disconnected. Like, branding is one thing, and then what I post is one thing, and then my YouTube channel or my blog is one thing, but really it's all connected, and it builds on who you want to serve.
I love that. I think that, I mean, it's awesome because, again, it really embodies what we're called to do as Christians, and that is to serve others, and love God. And yeah, I think that's awesome. So where can people find out more about it?
Yeah, so I don't have any landing pages or anything set up right now, but themarkedco.com has everything that you need to know. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, The Marked Co on Facebook. On Instagram, it's _ The Marked Co. So I'll have information coming in the next week or so about how to get signed up, or at least get on those emails so that you can hear more about it and kind of see if it's right for your business.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll make sure to link to all those so people can easily connect to you. This is awesome. I'm really excited to share this interview so that people can hear more about it, and also just hear more about like what we're called to do as entrepreneurs who are following Christ, and also just people working in the marketplace and everything. I think this is super awesome. I'm really excited, and I'm excited for what you're doing and everything that will come with it and how it's going to be glorifying to God.
Well, thank you
And
so much for having
yeah,
me, Katie. It was so good to talk to you again.
yes, thank you so much, Jordan. We will talk very shortly. Hey, thanks so much for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to my channel. That way I know that you're enjoying the content I'm putting out and will create more just like it. If you have any suggestions, feel free to reach out. See you soon.